The box of dead puppies sat on the shoulder of Route 66 for 18 hours before anyone noticed. By then, 5 were already cold, their tiny bodies stiff and silent against the rain-soaked cardboard. The 6th still breathed, but just barely. No one saw the scarred tomcat approach in the gathering darkness. No one witnessed the moment that defied nature itself. They called the truck stop the last mile, a fitting name for a place where travelers passed through but rarely stayed. A forgotten waypoint where drifters, truckers, and the occasional desperate soul sought temporary refuge before moving on to somewhere better. The perfect territory for a battle-worn feral cat who trusted nothing and no one. Ash, as one of the night cooks had named him, survived on scraps and hunting skills honed through 6 brutal winters. His left ear was partially missing. His gray coat bore the marks of countless territorial fights, and his amber eyes held the wariness of a creature who had learned that survival meant isolation. That night, he was making his usual rounds behind the dumpsters when the wind shifted, carrying the unmistakable scent of blood and death. Most ferals would have avoided it, instinct warning them away from potential danger. But something in the mingled odors caught Ash's attention. Something young. Something dying. Following the scent, he discovered the soggy cardboard box tossed carelessly into the drainage ditch. Inside lay 6 pit bull puppies, their brindle coats still slick with birth fluid. 5 were motionless, their bodies already cooling. The smallest, a runt with one distinctive white ear, trembled weakly, eyes still sealed shut, lungs struggling for each breath. The natural order was clear. The weak perish. It was the law Ash had lived by his entire life. Yet he didn't walk away. With surprising gentleness, the feral cat gripped the dying puppy by the scruff and lifted it from among its dead siblings. Blood from the puppy's unhealed umbilical cord smeared across Ash's jaw as he carried the tiny creature back toward the abandoned storage shed where he'd made his den. Nature had not designed him to be a savior. He had no milk to offer, no maternal instincts to guide him. Yet something primordial and unexplainable drove him to place the trembling puppy on his tattered nest and curl his scarred body around it, offering what little warmth he possessed. "Holy shit," whispered Maya Carson when she discovered them 3 days later. The 28-year-old waitress had been taking out trash from the truck stop diner when she spotted what she first thought was a cat eating something in the old storage shed. When she crept closer, reality struck her silent. The feral cat, the same one she occasionally left scraps for, was curled protectively around a newborn puppy. More shocking still was the crude but effective method the cat had devised for feeding. Regurgitated food and stolen cream, coaxed into the puppy's mouth with patient persistence. The cat hissed at Maya's approach, placing himself between her and the puppy. "Easy," Maya said, crouching down, making herself smaller. "I'm not going to hurt either of you." Her life had taught her about unexpected alliances, about survival against brutal odds. The fresh bruise darkening her cheekbone told its own story of struggle. Something about the unlikely pair before her struck a chord so deep she felt it in her marrow. "You two need help," she said softly and honestly. "So do I." Life in the desert town of Redemption, Arizona, offered few second chances. Maya had learned this during the 3 years she'd been stuck there, working double shifts at the last-mile diner, sharing a trailer with a boyfriend whose knuckles were as quick as his temper. The bruises she covered with makeup were getting harder to explain away, Taking in a feral cat and a newborn pit bull puppy was madness. But as she carefully transported both animals to her battered pickup truck, the cat refusing to leave the puppy's side, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Purpose. Her boyfriend, Jeff, was on a 3-day trucking run. She had time to figure things out before he returned, time to create a plan for all three of them. The trailer Maya called home sat on a dusty half-acre at the edge of town. Chain-link fence surrounded dead grass and scattered car parts. Jeff's perpetually unfinished projects. Inside wasn't much better. Cigarette-burned furniture, empty beer bottles, and the lingering scent of male rage. "Home, sweet home," she muttered as she carried the unlikely pair inside. At least for now. The cat remained vigilant, watching Maya's every move as she created a makeshift nest in the bathroom, the only room with a door she could close to keep them safe. When she returned with puppy formula purchased from the only pet store in town, the cat's amber eyes tracked her with suspicious intelligence. "You're something else," she told him, demonstrating how to use the tiny bottle. "Never seen anything like you." Surprisingly, the feral cat adapted to indoor life faster than Maya expected. He remained wary, always plotting escape routes, always watching, but he didn't try to leave. The puppy, whom Maya named Bullet for his against-all-odds survival, became stronger each day, his blind dependence on both the cat and woman creating a strange triangle of trust. The cat allowed Maya to handle the puppy, to bottle feed him properly, to check him for parasites. At night, they all slept in the bathroom, Maya on the floor with a pillow, the cat and puppy curled together in the makeshift bed. "Jeff's going to lose his mind," Maya whispered to the darkness. The cat's eyes gleamed back at her, unblinking. When Jeff returned 3 days later, the confrontation was even worse than Maya had anticipated. "You brought fucking strays into my house?" His voice echoed off the trailer walls. "A goddamn disease-ridden cat and a pit bull? Have you lost your mind?" The cat darted under the bathroom sink, Bullet tucked securely against him. "They needed help," Maya said, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be. "I'll find them a home soon." "You'll take them to the pound tomorrow," Jeff snarled, grabbing her arm, "or I'll deal with them myself." The familiar pain of fingers digging into flesh, the familiar fear rising in her throat. But this time, something else rose alongside it, a fierce protectiveness she hadn't known herself capable of. "No," she said, pulling away. "They stay." The slap caught her off guard, sending her stumbling against the bathroom doorframe. What happened next occurred so quickly that later, Maya couldn't recall the exact sequence. The cat, all 14 pounds of battle-scarred ferocity, launched itself from under the sink, claws extended, directly at Jeff's face. He screamed, flailing backward as razor-sharp claws tore across his cheek and forehead. "Get it off me!" he bellowed, blood streaming into his eyes. Maya didn't move to help. She watched, oddly detached, as the man who had terrorized her for years was brought down by a creature less than a tenth his size. Jeff stumbled out of the trailer, cursing and threatening. The cat returned to the bathroom, to Bullet, his fur slowly settling, his amber eyes never leaving Maya's face. That night, she packed what little she owned into her pickup truck. The cat watched from the passenger seat, Bullet nestled against his rough fur. "We're not going to the pound," she told them, as she drove away from the trailer, away from Jeff, away from 3 years of fear. "We're going to find somewhere better, all of us." They ended up in a run-down motel 40 miles west. It wasn't much. A single room with water stains on the ceiling and carpet that had seen better decades. But it was theirs. No Jeff, no fear. Just an unlikely family forged in desperation. Days stretched into weeks. Maya found a job waiting tables at a roadside diner not unlike the last mile. Bullet grew rapidly, his tiny body transforming into gangly puppy limbs and boundless energy. The cat, whom she finally named Ash, established new routines, still feral in many ways, but inexplicably bonded to both the woman and the dog he had saved. Bullet followed Ash everywhere, mimicking the cat's movements, learning to hunt from a species that should have been his enemy. When Bullet grew large enough that his paws dwarfed Ash's entire head, he still deferred to the cat, still curled against him at night, still looked to him first when uncertain. The motel owner, an elderly woman named Ruth, observed their strange dynamic with fascination. "In all my 78 years," she told Maya one evening, "I've never seen anything like those two. Goes against everything natural." "Maybe what's natural isn't always what's right," Maya replied, watching as Ash patiently tolerated Bullet's clumsy attempts to play. "Like staying with a man who hits you?" Ruth asked quietly. Maya's eyes snapped up, meeting the older woman's knowing gaze. "You're not the first to stop here running from something," Ruth continued. "This motel's seen its share of fresh starts." 3 months after their escape, Jeff found them. Maya never discovered how, perhaps the small-town gossip network, perhaps sheer determination. She returned from work to find his truck parked outside their motel room. Fear, cold and familiar, settled in her stomach as she approached the door. She opened it to find Jeff sitting on the bed, Bullet cornered and growling, Ash nowhere in sight. "Thought you could just leave," Jeff said, his voice deceptively calm. The scars on his face from Ash's claws had healed into jagged pink lines. "Take my truck and disappear." "It's my truck," Maya said, her hand still on the doorknob. "Just like this is my life. You need to go." Jeff stood, his bulk filling the small room. "I'm not going anywhere without you. We've got unfinished business." Bullet's growl deepened, but Jeff wasn't concerned. "Shut that mud up before I do it permanently." The air in the room shifted almost imperceptibly. A shadow detached itself from the ceiling light fixture. Ash, who had been silently observing from above. He landed on Jeff's shoulders with surgical precision, claws sinking deep, teeth finding the vulnerable flesh of the man's neck. The chaos that followed would later become a blur in Maya's memory. Jeff's screams, blood spattering across the faded wallpaper, Bullet joining the attack, his now considerable size and strength driving the man to the ground. When it was over, when Jeff had fled bleeding and cursing to his truck, Maya sank to the floor. Ash approached cautiously, his fur matted with blood not his own. He pressed his scarred head against her trembling hand, a gesture so gentle it broke something loose inside her. "We can't stay here," she whispered. Ruth helped them find a small cabin for rent in the mountains, far from town, far from Jeff, far from anyone who might ask questions about a woman living alone with a pit bull and a feral cat who were inseparable. Seasons changed. Bullet grew into a powerful adult dog, his brindle coat gleaming with health, his one white ear still standing in sharp contrast. Ash remained lean and wary, but his scars faded, and he developed a peculiar tolerance for Maya's touch. They created routines. Bullet would patrol the perimeter of their property each morning, Ash often perched regally on his broad back. Maya would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching them hunt together, the massive dog flushing rabbits from brush while the cat executed precise killing pounces. "You two defy explanation," she often told them. One crisp autumn evening, as Maya sat reading on the porch, a vehicle approached on the dusty road. Her body tensed, old fears resurfacing. Bullet and Ash materialized from the surrounding woods, taking protective positions on either side of her chair. The car that parked in front of the cabin wasn't Jeff's truck. A middle-aged woman emerged, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her clothes suggesting someone who worked outdoors. "Maya Carson?" the woman called. "Who's asking?" Maya replied, her hand resting on Bullet's solid head. "My name's Helen Winters. I'm a wildlife rehabilitator from the State Conservation Department." The woman approached slowly, noting the animal's protective stance. "Ruth from the motel told me about your unusual situation. I've been wanting to meet these two for months." Maya relaxed slightly. "They're not exactly social with strangers." Helen stopped at a respectful distance. "I can see that. May I?" She gestured to a chair on the porch. As they talked, Helen explained that she'd been documenting cases of cross-species adoption in the wild, a rare but not unprecedented phenomenon. "What makes your pair so extraordinary?" Helen said, watching as Ash groomed Bullet's face with meticulous care, "is the complete role reversal. Cats are typically prey for canids, not caregivers, and ferals rarely form attachments to any species, including their own." "So they're freaks of nature," Maya said with a small smile. "They're exceptional," Helen corrected, "and they've chosen you as part of their family." Family. The word settled around Maya like a warm blanket. She thought about the bruises that had finally faded from her skin, about the nightmares that came less frequently now, about the strange peace she'd found in this remote cabin with two creatures who had no business caring for each other, or for her. "I'd like to document their relationship," Helen continued. "With your permission, of course. People should know about this. It challenges everything we think we understand about animal behavior." Maya considered the request. "And what happens to them? To us?" "Nothing changes," Helen assured her. "You stay here. They stay together. I just visit occasionally, take some notes, maybe some photographs." Later that night, after Helen had gone, Maya sat on the edge of her bed. Ash was curled in his usual spot on the pillow, while Bullet sprawled across the foot of the mattress, his weight a comforting anchor. "What do you think, boys?" she asked softly. "Ready to be famous?" Ash blinked slowly at her, that deliberate cat blink that ethologists identified as the feline equivalent of a kiss. Bullet thumped his tail against the bed. Maya thought about the journey that had brought them here, about a cardboard box of dead puppies on the side of Route 66, about a feral cat who defied his nature to save a dying runt, about her own escape from a life of fear. Some bonds transcend nature, some families we find, rather than are born into, and sometimes the unlikeliest guardian appears precisely when needed most. Outside, the desert wind whispered through pine needles. Inside, an improbable family slept peacefully, each one saved by the others in ways that defied explanation.